the presentation of the 4 working groups. So by now you should have understood the structure. We've got the plenaries and the working groups. They go parallel. And the 4 thematic problem-setting solving groups will be on democracy, enlargement, digital, and finance. I stress this because you will be asked to join one of these groups after the presentation by the academics who have been working on this. So you will be able to choose which one you want to attend: democracy, enlargement, digital, and finance. And now I leave the floor to Jan and Francesco.
Jan, Francesco, Romano, Barbara, Maria, and Daniel, you all come. I hope that you can all sit here. Calypso online. Okay, but yes, okay. So, the presentation is somewhere here, no? Greta? Yes. This one? No, this is this one. Okay, so basically, before I leave the floor, please. It's Daniel, Romano.
We have enough chairs.
Do we have enough? No, we are. You are 5 people. No, 5. Five. Well, 6.
1,
but
2,
I can,
3, 4, 5. Or is it 6? Is it 5? With you, it's 6. Okay.
Yeah, with me 6.
That's fine.
So we will have as I said, Polish, British, Portuguese, Italian, Austrian, German, Italian, and a Greek Calypso on commenting the sort of a problem. Romano? Okay. Okay, so let me briefly introduce very few slides, few ideas from the concept paper, which can be useful to a little bit set the discussion, the debate, and also reiterate the method that we are trying to consolidate, to develop. We discussed very much with Maria yesterday, the epistemological question, you know? So, yeah, basically the good, the bad, and the ugly, by the way, as you may all know, is the title of the favorite movie ever of Roberto, and also myself, probably even Romano Prodi, with Sergio Leone, etc. I think it was 1964 or something. So there is a good, bad, and ugly news about the EU, and we probably can start from here. Of course, this thing does not work. How can I go? Okay, good. Okay. The Siena Conference. Well, the concept paper that we developed with students, tutors, and with political foundation was prepared before the very famous report from Mario Draghi, who wrote me a very beautiful letter saying, Francesco, Roberto, by the way, I am a little bit like overwhelmed by the attempt that I'm doing to make my report to be somehow impactful. So given that I'm meeting, by the way, the Italian Prime Minister, a few other people, I may not come on Saturday, but we somehow had to take in account that the Draghi report was released just 3 days before the Siena Conference. And I must say that there is at least one big similarity in terms of approach, with probably 3 qualifications. No? Well, the big thing that we have in common is that we share very much. I think I can say that for Vision, for Bocco, for Daniel, for University of Siena and all the political foundation. We share the urgency. We need a wake-up call. No, where is Annalisa? Annalisa is even the president of a foundation called the Wake Up Europe. So that's very true. It's very true that we have a huge investment gap. Mario Draghi is talking about 800 billion US dollar per year, which is quite a big amount of money. However, I would say that there are also a little bit of pre-qualification in terms of sort of difference between our report and the Mario Draghi report. Well, number one, of course, our report is very much collective effort of very many people. Mario Draghi has used, quite some capabilities, also at Banca d'Italia, but it's still Mario Draghi report, Also, the title of our concept paper is The Europe of the Future, no? The title of Draghi's report is the EU competitiveness. And we sort of argue that if we finalize the drafting of the future of Europe to the very important single parameter of competitiveness, we may have a result which is not necessarily the best that we can aim for, no? So that's the big the one qualification. The second qualification, we really very much want to do something in the next 1 year or in the next 2 or 3 years. The Draghi report is very, very ambitious, but still the bar that it is aiming for is really very high. It's not at all certain that anything will really happen. The third qualification is that it's true that Europe risks to be squeezed between China and the United States, but we would also qualify with those 3 dogs, not like the ones that Trump's used to eat, but they are 3 different dogs, that they are all some sort in crisis, no? Europe, yes, Europe is is facing mortal dangers, as Emmanuel Macron said, a couple of months ago to The Economist. But also, United States and China have got their problems. USA, according to some, are on the verge of some civil war, which is an exaggeration. China is very much losing the confidence in its economic means. And this is quite important because probably European Union must simultaneously adjust internally to competitiveness, etc., but also at the same time find some new leadership to fix a world order that is very quickly melting. So that's a little bit of a difference. Now, how can I go to the next slide quickly? Okay. So let's start with the bad. This is the Robert, if you can help me with the name of the actor, but I think it's Lee something. Okay, well, he was the bad one in the bad. Exactly, Van Cleef. The very bad news for European Union. We were talking about this yesterday with Romano and Maria. If you look, yes, it's true that there is a big investment gap, but if you look more specifically to an investment which is very important, investment in artificial intelligence in the last 10 years, you very clearly see that it's only just about United States and China, talking about 350 billion US dollar being invested by the United States and 100 from China. Europe is basically not existent. If you put together Germany and France, they have invested less than UK. And UK, Germany and France put together invested half than China. So we are talking about some battle for digital leadership that we are completely losing out. My friend Jan will remind that Europe is not a technological wasteland. It's true, we also have ASML, but if you are talking about, for instance, artificial intelligence, the consequence of such huge difference is that US organization designed something like 100 foundational models, which are the models that basically drive the large language models. China, something like 25, and Europe only 2 or 3, including Mistral. So we are talking about a battle that we are losing in a very bad way, no? If we go to the next slide quickly, there is a good, this is Clint Eastwood. The good is that there are a number of indicators where Europe has still got very clearly a leadership. Here is something which is quite important, which is the Freedom Index from Freedom House. Europe, apparently, actually, I would say even it's a very strong feeling when you are here. It's still the part of the world, together with our Aussie and Kiwi friends from Oceania, the part of the world where we are enjoying the greatest freedom. And this is quite important, because if you have freedom, freedom is a different notion from democracy, by the way. You have a society that should have an information advantage. Our point is that this is not just a value in se, it's something we want to leverage upon to even create an economic advantage. But let's go to the ugly part, to the third piece of news. In fact, this competitive advantage that we still enjoy in terms of freedom, in terms of welfare, for instance, healthcare system, you name it, are sort of deteriorating. Antonio Mazzeo just mentioned before about cohesion policies, So it's cohesion policies where it's a relatively small piece of the picture. Cohesion policies were very important for Europe, as Antonio mentioned rightly. We are spending more or less 1/3 of the European budget on cohesion policies, but this is what is happening to the difference. This is a dispersion indicator. In terms of difference in income per capita among different regions, they are called NUTS2 by Eurostat in terms of dispersion. The dispersion, the difference among regions, at least in the 15 old member states, is increasing. So the inequalities, the territorial inequalities in Europe are increasing. And the same thing is true for many other indicators of the European model, no? So going to the very last slide, and then I will stop. Our idea is, the overall idea of our concept paper is that we need to find some ideas, some proper ideas, some operationalizable ideas, actionable ideas, so that we can simultaneously leverage on the good stuff that Europe is still that does still have in terms of cities, most livable cities. It's the place where we enjoy more freedom, capability to speak, to represent our needs, our individual intelligence, into these things that we are sort of missing now: efficiency, innovation, dynamism. Those things are being framed by the problem-solving groups into trade-off. It's very interesting that the trade-off between democracy and efficiency, citizen rights, regulation and innovation, welfare and stability and dynamism. And we need to find a way to go beyond the zero-sum game. So we do a compromise, we move scarce resources from one important objective to the other. We make compromise. We need to go beyond the zero-sum game, the zero-sum game approach, and find a way to simultaneously use our advantage to create competitive advantage also in terms of competitiveness. And this is what the problem-solving groups are trying to do. So that's a little bit like the frame of the concept paper. Now I will leave to Jan to.
Yeah, can everybody hear me? Yes, I think you probably can. Thank you so much, Francesco. This has been a very eye-opening presentation. Well, first of all, let me welcome everyone. I'm Jan Petrowski. Until recently, I edited the business section of The Economist, and now I have been liberated to opine shamelessly on all matters corporate in the Schumpeter column. But I have been an attendee, a participant of these conferences pretty much since the start, and they always end with some interesting, very pragmatic results, which we hope to translate into action. This panel is going to be very high level. We're going to dig in to a lot of the themes that Francesco mentioned in subsequent panels in the working groups. So this discussion, the discussion over the next 45 minutes, is really going to be from a sort of 30,000 foot or 11,000 meter in metric view of the situation. And to do that, we have a very distinguished panelists, starting with Romano Prodi, who obviously, to anybody who cares about Europe, needs no introduction. We have Maria João Rodrigues, who's the president of the Foundation for European Progressive Studies. We have Daniel Gross, who's director of the Institute of European Policymaking at Bocconi University. Barbara Kolm, the former vice president of the Austrian Central Bank, and I believe online we have Calypso Nicolaidis of St. Anthony's College, Oxford. I think we'll begin maybe by I'll give a few minutes to each of the panelists to just hear their reactions to Francesco's pitch and see their high-level views before we open it up to a broader discussion. So Romano, maybe I can start with you.
Yes, I have always been a guinea pig in order to make experiments. Look, I followed with deep attention Francesco's speech and also your slides, and they describe a European situation, when there are broad principles, abstract idea, there is an agreement. When you go to the facts, there is a disagreement, So, and this is clearly what I am thinking in the last 5-6 years, Europe needs a shock, if we go on with the mediation, if we go on with let's trying to make everybody happy, we shall absolutely die. This is my point. When I see that we are the leaders in civil rights, but then China and US make more progress, and they organize all the instruments that will totally nullify our civil rights, because we, in a world that is dominated by the other two giants, even if you put your civil rights, that is good, of course, that you have to do, but then your point of view will stop by stop, will stop by stop disappear. This is my fear, and we lose ground, and we shall arrive in a point in which, if I sum up my pessimism, we shall write the menu, and the Americans and the Chinese will eat. Will sit down at table to eat, because, and step by step, we lose also voice and authority for the civil rights. This is my fear, Look, this was done in many very recent decisions. And what I mean with that, especially after I read the general part of the Draghi report, the first 69 pages. I have not, honestly, I have not yet seen all the annex, But if you analyze it, is a perfect report, absolutely perfect. Is what we have to do, is what, But then he has been the courage to add to this also the political aspects. And then you see that how could you implement it in a moment in which you have a big fighting inside France because they need, and they have not yet found 30 billion euros to fix up the budget. And you write correctly that you need 800,000 euros, billion euros for implementing the proposals that are inside the report. So we cannot live always in these contradictions. And the contradictions were clearly shown in the slides we have seen before, because there is no agreement to increase the European powers, and there is still a strong part of Europeans who want to keep or even to nationalize, to increase the nationalized aspects of the European politics. So I think that we absolutely have to decide if we go on with the mediation that we had in the post-COVID period now, all the mediation in all the fields. We launch a great green policy, and in the 2 months before the election, we have almost canceled all of that, for evident reason, because obedient to the statistics we have seen a few minutes before. So I really think that either we really change our mind and we make a battle, I repeat, a battle for changing institution, or we are lost. Because simply we cannot run, and US and China are running, in spite they have internal problems. And what I mean, unanimity is an impossible rule. And so I do think that we must let's say, resign ourselves to have a different speed Europe. But immediately, either we interrupt the unanimity rule or we have to adapt, as we did with the euro, complete new, let's say, rules of decision. But then we go to the political problem again, to have pass to different speed Europe. You need the example of the government leaders. And in this moment, France and Germany are in deep, deep, deep trouble, So my scenario is that we must, let's say, accept to have still a period of decay, of, let's say, difficult politics, in order that people take the conscience, share the idea that something strong must be done. Look, when is absolutely interesting when you see the most positive statistics, most positive data, the common European will in favor of helping Ukraine, and this majority to have Ukraine inside the European Union, all perfect. But as soon as there is a small problem that is damaging European states, some other nation, you have an incredible reaction. The Polish, and Poland is the most friendly country with Ukraine. In the moment in which you had a problem for Polish farmers, you had an incredible reaction against it, And so if we don't have clear rules, democratic rules, in which we have the institutional situation in which we can take decision, we shall go always changing from principles, rules for artificial intelligence, but no money on developing artificial intelligence. A declaration in favor of Ukraine, but when concrete problem arise, a country can block everything, And we cannot live in this contradictory framework. And so my point is very simple. No more, I don't say no more negotiation, I say more negotiation, but no more compromise, but some sort clear message in which we are asked, do we want Europe or not? Because Draghi report has many positive proposals, but the initial question mark is we are in front of the possible destruction of Europe, And so we have to be coherent, that you cannot apply any one of Draghi, of the strong Draghi proposal, with the institutional framework in which we live now. Sorry, I'm simplifying it, still being a little vulgar, but in politics, you are in a moment in which the moment of yes or no, and we have to put the problem to European people, to European Parliament, to European Commission, to European institutions. But I repeat, with the different speed of the two giants and the almost standstill of Europe, we miss our time if we don't take strong decisions.
Thank you, Romano. That was very sobering. Maybe I'll turn it over to Maria. Anything somewhat more hopeful? You are a progressive after all.
Okay. Jan, many thanks and a great pleasure to join all of you this morning. I need to start by saying that I consider that President Prodi, building on his experience and wisdom, he is just point the finger to the crucial question we are confronted with. Is basically, what kind of a democratic power do you want to be in the 21st century? This is as simple as that, the question. And I believe that this Siena Conference can bring interesting responses to this by focusing on particular problems. We have a good list of problems. So I start by asking myself how can be useful in this panel in launching the conference. And I think what I will do now is to bring to the conference the kind of discussion we are having in the so-called Brussels bubble, at the heart of the discussion in European institutions, putting together different actors, including the big political families. And I think the conference is also good for this. So let me give a flavor of the kind of discussion. Also because this year, the conference is very special. We decided to postpone the conference for September, exactly to use it to think about the next 5 years. So let me give this flavor about the kind of discussion we are having in the Brussels bubble about what should be the next 5 years. Of course, you just saw the speech delivered by President von der Leyen when being elected, so it is a very important reference. But behind this, behind the scenes, we have a complex discussion on the challenges in front of us. And I'd like just to pinpoint some of them. This time around is very different from the last 5 years. First of all, because we have something again coming to our continent, which is war. War with major consequences. And nobody knows until when this kind of war will last. But there is something we do know, is that if there is a solution for this war, if there is any chance to have a ceasefire, is building on a new architecture for European security. So this is a very important issue we'll discuss about in this conference. But then let me also underline that the European problems on security are not only about military security, but are about economic security. We are in a different world of global competition. And Europe is not prepared for big players such as China and now United States, who count on a very active industrial policy, and who can use also trade policy to create a kind of cohesion upon more vulnerable countries. So it's a completely different situation if compared with the last 10 years. And we need to develop our toolbox to improve economic security. Playing with real European industrial policy, a new kind of trade policy, addressing the critical materials issue, and so on. But this means that Europe should be very precise on defining the way to deal with the big players. United States, of course, we are now pending on a fundamental crossroads in American politics. Who will be the next American president? This is perhaps the most important game changer in our horizon. And then China, who is now rising to level 1 of global competition. So we are dealing with a powerful competitor from China's side, while we are supposed to explore some possible partnerships on common challenges. And this brings me to the last question on external action, is that let's not have illusions. Europe, at the same time, needs to build new partnerships across the world, with Africa, first of all, with Latin America, with Asian countries, notably ASEAN, to give an example. And at the end of the day, not to give up of multilateralism. I'm very pleased that the rector of the Siena University raised this issue, because we are in the run-up of an important summit of the future taking place in New York by the end of September, which is supposed to agree on new ways to deal with global challenges. So we Europeans, we are part of this discussion. But let me also pinpoint another big initiative, which is part of Europe rethinking its position in the world. This is about enlargement. Because we are committed with a new big operation of enlargement, and we perceive this as a kind of not only a moral duty, is a geostrategic imperative. But right now, we are discussing what should be the approach to enlargement. And we are concluding this is no longer just the classical approach of negotiating the acquis communautaire, and one day, a beautiful day, they will become members. No, we need to start involving them since now on our networks of energy, of digital, of industrial policy, of course, of foreign affairs coordination, and so on. They need to be involved from now on. Then another tricky issue we saw in the survey is migration. We do need migration, but the problem is, as we need to manage, we need to build a real European border, which we still don't have. So this is the background regarding Europe and the world. Let me pinpoint now the 3 big transitions. I'm using on purpose the number 3, because sometimes we speak about the green transition, the digital, but there is a third one, which is the demographic transition. With aging, with migration, we are going to a different kind of population in Europe. On the green transition, well, Draghi report just underlined this. To conduct this, we need to have a large-scale, long-term investment. Otherwise, Europe will simply lose any kind of possible leading role. But on the digital, we have a very serious situation, because it is true that Europe has introduced an important set of new regulations over platforms, over data, and so on. But we are walking with, let's say, one single leg, which is regulation. We should walk with the second leg, which is, by the way, Schumpeter's approach, innovation, capacity building. And here, Europe is completely lagging behind. We are discussing how could we focus on particular sectors, building on our data, regain ownership of our data, and start producing our own algorithms. This should be, let's say, a kind of innovation policy for Europeans to regain initiative in the digital transformation. And so this is one of the things we are discussing in the Brussels bubble. And the last transition, the social, this is about fundamental issues of investment. First of all, in housing. if there is a problem, everybody underlines across member states is housing, particularly for young people. So we need to have a real European plan for housing. And this coupled with the social services, including care services. Let me also underline this because frankly, I don't believe it's possible to have gender equality, women and men, if we don't build a professional care sector. Finally, I would like to conclude with one question. So if we have in mind these kind of priorities, well, we have a counter argument saying, I'm sorry, we don't have the financial resources for all this. So you need to choose. Perhaps you should sacrifice some of these priorities. And then I'm saying, look, which would be the priorities you sacrifice? Frankly, it's not easy. So I really think, and I completely agree with President Prodi, we need to have a serious discussion on how can we provide these financial resources. We know that the major share of these will come from the private side. This means to complete the capital markets union, but we also need to have powerful public tools, starting with the role of European Investment Bank, with a new phase of European strategic investment plan. But in the end, a lot will depend on the new budget. And let's have in mind that we start preparing the new budget of the European Union next year, next MFF. And we should build on the pandemic's experience and count on the capacity to issue European debt to finance strategic investment. But of course, I'm sure this will be a very hot topic of discussion in this conference and also across Europe. Final word about democracy. And about democracy, my point is not only the rule of law, which will become a crucial issue for the next years, also to prepare enlargement, but this is about the new way to exercise democracy, to involve people with participatory democracy. But in the end, again, I agree with President Prodi. I've been involved in operations regarding the European Union treaties. I myself, coming from Lisbon, I'm a Lisbon-born person. I was involved in the negotiation of the Lisbon Treaty. And the Lisbon Treaty has a potential to be used, but there's also clear limits of the Lisbon Treaty. So we need to prepare ourselves, I believe, to organize a revision of the treaties, not about everything, but about well-selected issues. And we should not just overlook this problem, because this is a clear limitation for the kind of democratic power we want and we should be in the 21st century. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria. I would like, that was a little bit more optimistic, so thank you. That was much needed. I think I'll try and link up with Calypso now. Calypso, do you want to weigh in with some thoughts of yours? He doesn't?
Yeah,
Okay.
no, I'm fine, but you have to allow me to turn on my camera because it doesn't enable.
That's absolutely fine. Please go ahead.
But I don't have it. It doesn't allow me to turn.
No. Just, I mean, you can just. I think we will enjoy your voice.
Well, I'm on camera. It's just your people, your technical people, need to allow it, because when I start video, it doesn't somehow allow me to do that. It says you know the organizers should have to do this.
Our technical people are working on it.
Okay, that's fine. I'm just gonna say a few words, because above all, I think everyone in the lovely Pontignano setting knows how much I love to be part of you every year and have all these conversations, not just in our big panels, but, you know, outside in the beautiful landscape where we are all inspired to talk much more informally. And so this is a second
There we go.
There
Success.
we go. Where we, I'm sorry, this is induction week in Florence at the EUI. So I'm teaching in an hour or so. So I can only be with you this way. And in fact, this is the world we live in that Maria was talking about. So let me simply say that when we, things sound very, very complex. We have this huge agenda. We have an agenda about our countries and how they agree on all of these issues or fail to agree. All this related to the global. We have the UN Future Summit coming up next week. A lot of what you're going to discuss in the next 2 days is relevant to that summit. And then we have all the way down to where real democracy happens in our cities and our regions. And the thing is, the challenge for Europe is not just to connect these three levels vertically, but horizontally. And that's always been the challenge. And we need to remember that Gen Z, which is probably in the room, but I can't see you, alas, but I will assume, tends to really be much more interested, you know, in about stuff beyond Europe, the global climate, and the very local. How do I struggle with groups on energy groups or housing, as Maria was talking about? And Europe is kind of a bit of the lost in the middle, very abstract, very bubble Brussels, as Maria was talking about earlier. So this is Gen Z, and how we connect to the next generation. I think we've said this in Vision, and we say it again and again. As we look at these complex agendas that are set up in the political and civil servant circles, and to simplify things, because I'm far away and I need to simplify, I would say, and it's already that we have two sides. We've got the dark side and the bright side. And it's as simple as that. Who's going to win? And the dark sides have to do with what Romano was talking about, and even Maria Joao, what we're all thinking about, the rise of the autocrats and the warmongers, and how they attract the people with their simple language of us versus them, all of that. And of course, many of us watched the debate in the US. So no need to kind of belabor the dark side. But I think it is our vision, as well as our responsibility, to really talk about the other side, the bright side, what is happening in the world that gives us hope. So it's not just a vision of what could be, but rather taking it what is and what can be transformed and generalized and maximized and empowered. This is in our jargon of philosophy, that what we call immanent critique. What is immanent in the world that we can bet on, as it were? I call this the third democratic transformation, and I'm happy to share whatever I've written on this, but I'm not going to dump it on you. But the third democratic transformation after the ancient city-states and parliaments is about, indeed, a new kind of democracy that is emerging everywhere, a democracy that's trans-temporal, i.e. transgenerational, that is, of course, transnational, yes, but horizontally, as I was saying before, but also transmode. It's happening in different ways, from speaking to virtual, to citizen assemblies, to the good old electoral system, but revamped. And it is about linking many different scales. So there is a story to be told about the emerging third democratic transformation. And in that story, then, where is Europe? And Maria, you talked about it already very much. Europe is not there to say, hey, guys, to the rest of the world, we're the best and we are ahead in democracy, because it still has a lot of work to do. And we can be very critical. But it should be, now we go to the should, it should be aiming for becoming, in this great geopolitical struggle, citizen power Europe. what I call Citizen Power Europe. So not only is there a big struggle between autocratic systems and more democratic system, I wouldn't say democratic system, but on the scale, more democratic, but also systems that try to do democracy across borders, transnational democratic system. And that's where Citizen Power Europe comes in. And this is where I would say that this challenge of involving citizens, creating collective intelligence, collective appropriation, runs across all of the areas you're going to be discussing. It's not like there's this separate footnote session on democracy. And in fact, you demonstrated it very well already. You know, if we talk green, if we talk digital, we're always talking actually democracy. We're talking democratic resilience of our systems to internal and external threat. We are talking about the quality of the policies we adopt in trade, industries, etc. Who decides and how? We are talking about the radicality of sunlight, what I call the radicality of sunlight. We had a great report about this in Brussels. We are also talking about what I call reversing the gaze, asking the rest of the world what they can teach us in doing democracy better. And when we talk about Citizen Power Europe, yes, of course, Maria, we're talking, of course, that's going to be perhaps probably the biggest topic, cross topic, enlargement. Enlargement is at the core of our challenge in the next 5 years. We all know this. But here, with my lens of Citizen Power Europe, I would come back to the fact that enlargement has to be prepared if it's for real right now, involving our networks, yes, all the way down, because when you hear again and again from citizens in Serbia and Bosnia-Herzegovina, in North Macedonia, is if only when we deal, you Europeans could empower us, the citizens groups, the transparency groups, all of these groups, your Copenhagen criteria, you would get them. You don't get them with bureaucrats visiting and having checklists. You get them by empowering societies there, and therefore changing the fabric of a society that can push back against state capture, the biggest ill of these countries, as well as ours, by the way, but that's a whole other topic. State capture, corporate capture, how do we actually re-empower the people in this big world where these big challenges need to be faced? Now, just a last footnote, if you allow me to say that what I've been doing, and including speaking with Francisco, speaking about it last year at Pontignano, is the Democratic Odyssey, where we're just doing one small part of the puzzle with a consortium of 30 members, and anyone can join. We have a network of 500 people helping, and an assembly coming in Athens with 200 members in a couple of weeks. And we're trying to invent it as we go along, inventing people power, a people's assembly that we hope, and that will go from one city to the next around Europe. And we hope will showcase what this new kind of third democratic transformation can look like in the very small way in which we can contribute to the story. So I very much hope and wish you all the best with discussions in Pontignano. I will continue to listen in and really apologize for not being with you, and wishing you lovely conversations.
Thank you so much, Calypso. In keeping with the tradition of this wonderful, venerable conference, we are obviously running late, even in our second session. So I will ask the remaining two speakers to be as concise as possible, starting with Barbara.
Well, thank you, Jan. I will try my best and just speak faster. Well, but really, as Francesco said, we as Europeans have been squeezed in between the US and China. But this is also a question of our mindset. And this is what Maria has said. Let's not have illusions. I would even go further and say we have been very naive in many things on the European level, but also on our national levels. So there was a famous politician who said a fortnight is a long time in politics. And this is what we in Europe most of the time think. In the US, you have a middle-term thinking, which is, from in election cycles. Whereas the Chinese, and remember those three dogs at the very beginning, the Chinese think in centuries. They think very long time. Their goals are very long-term. Whereas, again, the US, 4 years election cycles, and we in Europe also, because each and every year we have in our nation states elections. So this is where people are concentrating on, and so it's very short time. And then we try to fix the problems that come up, very fast without this long vision. Another issue that we face, and you can criticize the EU and the Commission in many ways. On one thing, they have really been very productive. 13,000 acts between 2019 and 2024, an average of 7 acts a day. So the question is now, were those acts to the good of the economy, of our enterprises? And as Maria so well designed, we need to look at the economic security of Europe. So if we produce a lot of paper, a lot of regulation, a lot of bureaucracy, will this in the end help us to become more competitive? And if we look at the big last slide that Francesco presented, the good, democracy, rights, and welfare. I mean, the rule of law, luckily we have it, luckily we can protect it. Democracy rights are also good. Welfare, not so good, because we have a huge pull factor. We obviously attract people who are unable to contribute to our system, because what Europe is lacking is productivity and competitiveness. And if we don't fix that problem, we are dead. We will be a Disneyland for tourism. And even then, we need jobs there. We need people who support our tourists, who serve our tourists. And that we need people who want to work, who want to be productive. So that's a big issue. So let's look at what can be done. Well, supply-side economics unleash the powers of the individual on the one hand, but also allow the enterprises to also compete with each other and among each other. And you may like it or not, or I actually thought it was very critical at the beginning, the US Tax Cuts and Job Acts. If we look at the data, we now have data from Yale and from other universities in the US, 2023, 2022 studies that show us that a growth rate of 5.7% per year was achieved with this Tax Cuts and Job Act. So let's look reversely. I think we need something like that in Europe, not more bureaucracy and not more regulation. And there is a very good part in the Draghi report that especially addresses the financial regulatory burden, where he says we need to reduce that. On the other hand, there is also a lot of more regulation of more of the same things into that. So addressing lack of productivity is key. And to go I'm not going into depth, but the big problems are growth, decarbonization, and security. And if we look at growth, the persistent terms of the trade shock when higher energy prices. Competitiveness I already addressed, but also in challenges in the export markets. China is no longer a growing export market for us in Europe. Medium-term fiscal drag, new fiscal rules require adjustments, and long-term adverse demographics. Thanks, Maria, for addressing them, because this is a huge problem for us. So we also need to provide also policies of how we can be more reproductive in Europe. The next point is decarbonization. The baseline problems are pulling off the EU Green Deal in a way that we do not gold plate. For us, for example, in Austria, we want to reach the goals by 2030. The results were companies had left Austria, revenues for the taxman were reduced, etc. So yes, environment is truly important. We need to decarbonize, etc. but let's do it gradually and not enforce it in a way that we strangle our economies. And then security, the baseline problem is security dependence on the US, and us, and especially our friends in Eastern Europe have Russia next door. So this is a huge issue that needs to be addressed. I would leave it like here, but remember, if the US can create growth within 5.7% per year, then I think we Europeans should be able to do the same.
Thank you so much, Barbara. And to round us off, Daniel.
Thanks a lot. Given the time constraint, I will be somewhat categorical. And I wanted to start with this image of a competition among big players, EU, China, US, and that somehow we, EU, are squeezed, we don't have common decision-making or have industrial policy. I think that image is completely misleading. Misleading in the sense that it leads us to do the wrong things, and even wronger things if we have more common institutions. Just first of all, just think about all the small countries that are doing well. The smaller countries within the EU that are doing well. It's the Koreas, Singapore's, China, Switzerland's, the countries that take the world as given and adapt themselves. Not trying to say, oh, you don't play fairly, and therefore I must support our own industries. Because that doesn't lead anywhere in the long run. So I think that's the first part, which I think in this discussion, which is very dangerous. And I think the Draghi report, unfortunately, adds fuel to that fire. And now, what is the problem then for Europe? I think it's actually outlined very well in the bad, which we saw here, in the passage of the Draghi report, which nobody has caught on. It's a combination of the two. We saw here about AI, foundational models. Europe's absent, right? But that's just the point of the iceberg, right? And below has been lots of lack of investment in software by European enterprise, not by Europe, not by the US, but by US enterprises, not because they were pushed by the government by some industrial policy, but because they found it profitable. And indeed, they made lots of profits, right? And Draghi also finds that if you take industry outside the ICT and software, in what I call the material world, the manufacturing, Europe is okay, right? And then the next step is you propose industrial policy to strengthen our manufacturing base. So that, right? I think, and that's why it's so important that we take into account that what we have a problem is in this, what I call immaterial world, which we are strangling also with our regulations. I think everybody said that. And the next step is, okay, let's give them some subsidies. So maybe we have a large language model in Europe, but right, a model that probably nobody will use. I think it's very important to really diagnose the problem really. And the second aspect, which I think is misleading us, which is this lament about, oh, the end of the global trading system as we have seen it. Besides the fact that there have been lots of studies now that show that trade has not fallen, right? And the hard fact is simply that it is between the US and China, or rather the US, which is putting more and more obstacles to imports from China. They are shooting themselves in their own foot. Why should we imitate that? Moreover, actually, the US stopping imports from China creates a big market for us that is protected from Chinese competition, right? Because no EVs can be imported into the US. Our people can export high-priced EVs to the US. So instead of lamenting about the flood of Chinese imports, we should think about the flood of our exports to the US and others. And as a matter of fact, we still have a very large trade surplus. right? Absent 1 or 2 years. So to summarize, I think it's, if you do the diagnosis right, it's not industry, it's not the material world where we need 800 billion. We need much more freedom to unleash our immaterial world, as my neighbor said earlier, to have them, to give them the freedom to develop that side of our economy which is lacking, and that is not something that requires 800 billion in public subsidies.
Thank you. So actually, we're not running that badly behind. So maybe change is possible in Europe. I just wanted to say a couple of things at the end. I mean, I don't think we'll have a time right now for a full-blown discussion, but over the next 2.5 days, we will be discussing these themes in much more detail. And obviously, all of you are invited to accost the panelists during lunch and during coffee breaks. I just wanted to sort of sum up what was said during the panel, and I think sort of went a nice full circle. We started with Romano talking about giving us the real sense of urgency that something needs to change. Then Maria told us that there are available policy tools in some areas, but maybe Europe doesn't have quite enough of them. We had Barbara tell us that maybe in some places we have too many. And Calypso talked about the importance of bottom-up change and sort of, going back almost to the sort of citizen subsidiarity principle, not political, but social. And then Daniel finished up on an incredibly optimistic note in a way, which I read as basically to be building on Europe's strengths, of which there are some and quite considerable ones. That includes both learning from the smaller countries in Europe, which are doing very well to adapt. That is, letting what Europe is doing successfully continue and channeling resources to where perhaps it needs a little bit more help. So I think that's all a really good scene setting for the next 2.5 days. I would like to thank all our panelists. Please give them one more round of applause. And just to finish this off, one thought that occurred to me as we were talking, as I looked at the battered dogs in Francesco's presentation, the 3 battered dogs. It is interesting that each of the countries, each of the areas, regions, the United States, Europe, and China, find themselves in a place of a certain type of paralysis. But the paralysis is the result of different forces. In America, it's a result of polarization. In Europe, it's a result of an attempt at consensus building. And in China, it's a result of a top-down diktat, which also leads to an awful lot of polarization. Our reporting from China shows that basically what is happening there is stifling innovation more than fostering it. Now, so if you diagnose the sources, the causes of paralysis, I think that is the first step to overcoming it. And I know that this is the problem setting part of this conference, a problem setting goal. And I'm sure that once we all get our heads around it, we can briskly move on to the problem solving part of the conference. And in order to do that, I think right now we'll be introducing the 4 problem setting and problem solving groups. So briskly onto this. Thank you very much.